November 16, 1855, a new Tennessee county was established on the Cumberland Plateau. Cumberland County, as it was to be called, named after the Duke of Cumberland of England, provided new settlers with abundant farmland, acceptable climate, and a breathtaking landscape.
And it was also a prime hunting ground for the Cherokee Nation. We do know that in the early 1800s there was a Cherokee station at the crab orchard, and it was called the Crab Orchard.
As more and more pioneers blazed their way through this rugged yet majestic territory, the tension began to build between the Indian and the white man.
Thomas Sharp Spencer was kind of a Paul Bunyan type character, and there are quite a lot of writings about him and about his life. He was a giant of a man. He had huge feet, and he was called Thomas Bigfoot Spencer. During one winter, he was in a fight with a bear, and the bear had backed him up against this tree. And just as he thought the bear was fixing to kill him, he fell backward, and when he did, he fell right into the tree, which was hollow. And it turned out that this sycamore tree was the bear's den. So he waited for the bear to come in, and he had one shot, and he shot the bear and killed him. And he decided that this looked like a pretty good place to stay, so he spent the entire winter living in this hollowed out sycamore tree. And this was in the Miro district, which was south of Nashville. He had family that lived in North Carolina, and he returned there, and on his way back, he went through the crab orchard where he was ambushed, and he was murdered by the Cherokee Indian Doublehead. He is said to be buried near Spencer's Rock that is just east of Crab Orchard. As you're going to Knoxville, you will pass this mountain, will be up on your left, that's known as Spencer's Hill, and there's also a rock up there, and this is Spencer's Rock, and that's supposed to be where the Indians hid when they ambushed Thomas Sharp Spencer.
The land on which we live was different from any other, part of a range of mountains that seemed to dare anyone to cross, much less settle here. But once atop the plateau, it was easy to see why early travelers wanted to call it home. But so did the Indians, and that dilemma had to be worked out one way or the other.
They could settle here with a land grant, but still it was Indian land. There was a treaty with the Indians that was good till around 1810. And they were actually settling on Indian land. But you know how those things went at that time. They didn't pay too much attention to the treaties.
When you're doing family research, you must remember that first this was Indian territory. When Greenberry Wilson came here, this was still Indian lands, and he built his home here under squatters' rights, which means a person who came into Indian territory and built a home came without a clear title to it, because this was not recognized as being homestead area at that time.
Whether it was a land grant or sheer determination, the white man continued to venture into the territory. Surely it seemed there was enough land to go around for both the Indian and the white man, but of course neither side saw it that way. The price was to be paid, and the price was blood. At times, just passing through with your scalp still on your head was a real feat. It was a simple question of roads.
Now the Avery Trace was cut through by Peter Avery, and some parts of it went over the Indian Trail. So there were still skirmishes because the white men that passed through with their wagon were still killing Indian game. The reason for the old Walton Road was after the treaty with the Indians was made, a part of that treaty was that they would drop south and build a road that the white man was supposed to travel. They were not to travel the Indian road. So that left the old Indian Trace and the Avery Trace for the Indians, and the Walton Road was to be the road of the white man as he brought his wagon through. And of course this is part of why we've lost the Avery Trace, because the Avery Trace was then not used, but the old Walton Road became the main road through this county from the east to the west.
Deals were made and treaties were signed, and settlements began to spring up from one end of the plateau to the other. It was then very apparent that something had to be done about forming official boundaries of their own. You see, this territory was simply the extension of several surrounding counties already established. If you're going to settle up here, you might as well get ready for long trips to the courthouse.
It was a day's journey to go to any one of these other county seats if they had to go on business. So a bunch of them decided that if they carved up a section of this plateau area within a day's travel, that it would be the ideal location for a county.
They were the remotest people just about from every area as far as where they went to serve on juries and where educational centers were located. And for this reason, Eldridge Myatt, M-Y-A-T-T, introduced the bill to form Cumberland County. Eldridge Myatt was a state legislator from the county of Morgan County. He lived in the Genesis community, and when Cumberland County was cut out, he found that instead of being in Morgan County, he now lived in Cumberland County.
And written into the act was to establish a county seat as near the center of this new Cumberland County as possible. Anyway, Crossville was already here because there was a place here called Scott's Crossroads.
It was the birth of a brand new Tennessee county. After all the adversities, a rugged terrain, Indian battles, a remoteness of location, it now seemed like a time to enjoy this new land full of abundance and beauty. But in short order, more trouble began. This time, we were fighting among ourselves.
Ready! Ready! Hey! Fire! Hey! Low!
To many, it must not have seemed very fair or right. Settling Cumberland County had been a difficult task, to say the least. Now this, families torn apart, brothers fighting brothers, fathers against sons. Surely there had been a mistake. This is civil war? Those words usually don't go together.
The Civil War was a very difficult period for Cumberland County. Many of our families were split right down the middle. Almost every family had young men who served in both the Confederate and the Union forces. The rosters that I have seen of Cumberland County are almost evenly split between those who served in the Federal Army and those who served in the Confederate Army.
With their allegiance divided, Cumberland County had it especially rough during the Civil War. As one soldier wrote, "I can't fight eagerly when the enemy may be my family." Another wrote, "What is this horror, and how does a man justify destroying his own kindred?" Cumberland County was used by both sides to further their cause, at times alternately camping within the very same refuge, the Saltpeter Cave.
Approximately 4 to 5 years after the end of the war, there was a school teacher who took some boys into the Saltpeter Cave in Grassy Cove for them to do some exploring. When they had dropped down into one of the alcoves, they suddenly found this body that was lying on a natural shelf. And this body was clothed in the full regalia of a Confederate soldier. He had his hat over his face, and when they examined the body, it seemed to be stiff. Well, they, of course, were scared to death, so they ran out of the cave and went and told about what they had seen in there. It was determined that he should have a Christian burial. For that reason, his body was taken down to the Grassy Cove Methodist Church, which was established in 1803, and he was buried there. Well, it wasn't long after he was buried in the cemetery that all the stories started surfacing that he was coming up and he was haunting the church. Well, the school was also held in the church. And whether children just wanted this as an excuse or not, they said they were afraid to go to school because the petrified Confederate soldier might be there and haunt them. So mothers were not making their children go to school, and church attendance fell way down. So it was agreed by several of the men in the Grassy Cove community that they would dig up the petrified Confederate soldier's body and rebury it in another location and leave the grave open so everyone could see that he was no longer there and they could return to church and school.
It was 1871 the Presbyterian Board decided to establish a Presbyterian church in Grassy Cove. After the church was organized, they decided to establish a school. It began in about 1880, and it was called Grassy Cove Academy, with a curriculum so outstanding eventually that students who graduated here could enter college without an entrance examination. As Cumberland County began to recover from the devastating Civil War, communities began to flourish with new settlers. Communities with names like Vandiver and Mayland, site of one of the oldest homes in Cumberland County. And one community proved to be a land of bliss for many. It was promoted in this way in 1890. There is but one Cumberland Plateau. There is but one Pomona. Other places on the plateau have their attractions, and other localities on the plateau have their advantages. But Pomona offers beauty of situation, a good soil, a most desirable neighborhood of enlightened and cultured people.
The house at Pomona, the houses at Pomona were not like the houses over the rest of the county that you've seen in here, but they were two-story houses, three-story houses, with all the gingerbread and everything on them of a house in New York.
In the 1840s, John Wood Dodge came to what became the Pomona community in Cumberland County. John Wood Dodge was a world-famous portrait painter. He did miniature portraits. He did a portrait of, and did the last portrait that was done of Andrew Jackson before his death. He also painted other famous figures. He supported the land that he had purchased in Pomona through his portrait painting. He was what we would call the Johnny Appleseed of Cumberland County. He planted several thousand apple trees, as well as other fruit trees in the area that became known as Pomona. He had to leave this area during the period of the Civil War, and he returned north. But as soon as the war was over and he felt safe, he came back to this area. He built 10 homes for his family. There are a few of these homes that are still left in the Pomona community. Most of them have been renovated to be more heat efficient, but several of them are still standing.
As time drew on, many more settlements were established at various locations throughout our county. Each community with its own identity, its own personality. To completely understand our heritage, one must study these communities and their people. Each settlement so unique that at times it's difficult to really believe they're part of the same county. The town of Crossville, originally called Scott's Crossroads, had been designated the county seat. Up till then, Pleasant Hill and Crab Orchard and Grassy Cove and other settlements on the county's outskirts were certainly more populated and, in a sense, more progressive. However, this mandate that Crossville be the county seat certainly sped up its growth at a much more rapid pace. Of course, if you had any legal matters to tend to, you had to come into Crossville. That's where the courthouse was.
The first county courthouse was built as a one-room log building. It was found that this was inadequate, and in 1886, the second county courthouse was built. This county courthouse building is still standing, and the outer walls of this building are what are still standing. One of our illustrious citizens had failed to pay his property taxes, And he got the bright idea that if he burned the courthouse down, they couldn't prove he hadn't paid his property taxes. So the interior of this building was burned, and only a few of the records were saved. But the records that were saved were the land records, so they still knew that this fella hadn't paid his property taxes. But this building sat in ruins as the inside of the building was burned for approximately 3 to 4 years before anything was done with it. Meanwhile, the new courthouse building was built, which is the present county courthouse, in 1905. And this building is still being used as the county courthouse. We have had additions to it that have been done in such a way that we've not lost the integrity of our building. We're very fortunate that our county still can look back and have a building that we're proud of. The second county courthouse building, which was the one that the interior was burned, the county court voted that they would make the interior of this building serve as the first county public high school. When they checked the exterior of the building, the walls were found to be perfectly safe. So they then rebuilt the inside, which did become the first public high school in Cumberland County. Today it houses the Cumberland County Historical and Genealogical Society and is being established as a Cumberland County Museum.
Cumberland County was struggling to become a viable and productive East Tennessee county. And though the Civil War was over, times continued to be tough for folks who made their homes here. Certainly not known to be an affluent area, folks here mostly were settlers who worked very hard just to keep their families fed and clothed. Farming was their way of life.
You take Crab Orchard, there was a lot of good land there, a lot of good land in Grassy Cove, out here towards Tabor and that area there was good land, Mayland.
Life was hard on the plateau. Many small family farms were established, but the land sometimes was unforgiving. It took a lot of hard work just to produce crops to live on. The soil in some cases was not rich, and although the early settlers couldn't have known, there lacked certain elements in the soil for good crop growing. On top of this, there was a lot of rock up here on the mountain, in some cases just inches below the surface, solid rock. And for those who were lucky enough to have good crop-bearing soil, there was yet another dilemma.
You could raise potatoes, beans, and stuff like that up here, no problem, but no place to market them. My grandfather Brookhart raised apples in around 1880 and 90, along in there, and on up till around 1915. And most of the time he had to take a load of apples to Rockwood in a wagon until the railroad came. Then he'd bring them in from Peavine to Crab Orchard and ship them.
The turn of the century brought many changes, not the least of which included mass transportation. With the arrival of the railroad came a revitalization of Cumberland County. The railroad would take our produce to market and bring supplies to us. This was indeed a landmark in Cumberland County's evolution. And it was during the same period that other signs of progress began showing up.
For one thing, it got a bank in 1900, First National Bank. That bank opened in the first day of business in the location where the Chronicle brick building is now. There was a wooden two-story building there that housed the bank and the newspaper.
So now there was a bank, a newspaper, and a railroad. Matter of fact, the railroad would help put Crossville right in the movies.
For me, please, and tell them I'm going home.
I'll be more than glad to, Alvin.
Thank you, Mr. Hull.
Sergeant York was a motion picture about a real-life World War I hero who was born and raised just a few miles north of Cumberland County in a small community known as Pell Mell. This scene covers Sergeant Alvin C. York's return home as he arrived at the now historic Crossville Railroad Depot. Educating their young was very important to early Cumberland County settlers. Pleasant Hill Academy, like the others, was started as a church-supported school. But Pleasant Hill Academy grew to be much more than just a community school. Students would come from great distances to be educated at the academy. A boarding house was built, and soon Pleasant Hill Academy had gained quite a reputation for being the school to attend for a quality education. It was also Pleasant Hill Academy that had brought a young lady and her husband from the north. The husband to principal the school, and the young lady seemed to be destined to help heal the sick. Dr. May Wharton saw a great need for medical attention to be given to the mountain folk, and she made it her life's work making sure they got it.
She saw how difficult it was to travel across the county and to bring medical attention to the people of Cumberland County. Yet she was willing to do this. She did it on horseback. When she finally got an automobile that she could travel in, she found that there were a great many places where the automobile could not go. So many times she would drive as far as she could and then get out, and she would have to walk the rest of the way to make her calls as a doctor. Her devotion to the people of this county earned her the name Dr. Woman of the Cumberlands, and she was very respected by the people of this community. But it was always Dr. May's dream that there be medical facilities established in the center of Cumberland County so that they could better serve all the people of the community. She was fortunate enough to live to see her dream realized and was a part of the groundbreaking ceremonies for what we now have at the Cumberland Medical Center. And Cumberland County owes a great debt of gratitude to Dr. May Wharton and the fact that she stayed here and that she dedicated her life to the mountain people and to seeing to their medical needs.
Cumberland County was really beginning to take shape as a new century was beginning. Crossville began looking more and more like a township. Growth for this area, however, was slow. It was well into the 20s before dirt roads were being replaced with gravel. A few more businesses were opened, mostly family-owned businesses that helped keep Cumberland County supplied with essentials. Although the idea had been to form a new county so travel time could be cut down, Cumberland County was a lot of real estate to cover in and of itself. So many of the outlying communities remained intact. Several of them opened their own businesses, like the Kimmer store in Grassy Cove, one of the first signs of commerce in Cumberland County. Toward the southwestern part of the county, Clifty was booming as a mining community, complete with schools, churches, a company store, and a railroad. Like so many other communities throughout the region, if there was coal to be mined, there was work to be done, and that's where you'd find a whole lot of folks. Another place you'd find a whole lot of folks was in the churches. As we've seen, a strong devotion to religion was a driving force behind our county's development. The churches educated our young, cared for the sick, provided a community meeting place, all the while helping to instill good and moral values among its people. Nothing helped speed the growth of this community any more than the arrival of the automobile. Those long journeys to town were made much quicker and more comfortable. More families began to move in, industry started up, a high school was built in town. Cumberland County was making a name for itself as an ideal place to live. The Great Depression saw many families moving north to find work, but in 1934, the Homestead Project began. It was a plan under the Roosevelt administration designed to put people to work and make housing affordable. This co-op building program, one of 8 nationwide, brought many new families to Cumberland County. Only a few of the original homesteaders are still around, but many of the small two-story houses, mostly renovated, are still lived in today throughout the Cumberland homesteads. Families can still send their children to the homestead school, and the homestead tower, originally a water tower, has been renovated as a historical museum, standing tall and proud, sort of like a monument to the strength and determination of those who came before us. Cumberland County is known for its natural beauty. Thousands of acres of it on the plateau, each quadrant different from the other. The northeast section of Cumberland County is covered by a portion of the 80,000-acre Catoosa Wildlife Management Area, the largest state-owned area devoted to the restoration of deer and wild turkey. From communities like Rennie to Bakers to Woody, Oak Hill, Lantana, Hebbitsburg, Peavine, Burke, and Big Lick, there's a kind of penetrating beauty you'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere else in the world. And surely it must have been this beauty that caught the eyes of the early settlers long ago. Scenes like this one from the Cumberland Mountain State Park, built in 1934, help remind us we have a lot to be thankful for. Cumberland County's heritage is deep-rooted in the belief that good things really do come to those who keep the faith and keep a spirit that just won't break. All it takes is one long look out over the Cumberland Plateau to fully understand that through good times and bad, there really is no place quite like our Cumberland County home.